The air was thick with a suffocating silence, pierced only by the sound of distant murmurs and the rustle of expensive fabrics. Clara stood among a sea of strangers in a lavishly adorned hall, her heart pounding so loudly she feared the people around her could hear it. A spotlight illuminated the stage, a single beam highlighting her trembling figure as if she were a rare artifact in a twisted gallery. She wished desperately to vanish. "Next up, a one-of-a-kind beauty." The auctioneer's voice boomed, oozing with false charm that turned Clara's stomach. Clara, daughter of the esteemed Gerald Hawthorne, a true treasure for the highest bidder. The phrase highest bidder echoed in her mind like a death knell. She was not a treasure. She was his daughter, and yet here she was, reduced to nothing more than a commodity to be sold to the highest bidder. As her father's greed loomed over her like a dark cloud, all Clara felt was a profound sadness that threatened to swallow her whole. She caught a glimpse of him in the back of the room, a man who had once cradled her in his arms, now standing as a silhouette of everything that was wrong in her life. Gerald Hawthorne wore a mask of indifference, eyes cold and calculating as he surveyed the crowd. He had forsaken her in the most crushing way possible, by turning her into an object to be sold, a mere financial transaction in his mind, devoid of familial love or respect. Clara's chest tightened, the walls of despair closing in on her as she tried to swallow the lump in her throat. Memories of laughter and warmth faded into the chilling reality of what her life had become. She had always believed in the goodness of people, in familial bonds that transcended greed. But that belief had shattered, leaving only confusion and betrayal. As the auctioneer began to recite her supposed qualities, Clara's mind drifted. She mentally clawed her way through the darkness, searching for a glimmer of hope. What would life be like after this? She had heard whispers of wealthy men who relished in their power over young women, and every whispered gasp from the crowd made her skin crawl. Would he be kind? Would he look at her and see a person? Or merely an investment? A toy to flaunt? "Look at her!" a woman in the audience cooed, her voice dripping with disdain. "How degrading for the poor thing!" Clara's cheeks flushed with humiliation. She fought to maintain her composure, to banish the tears that threatened to spill over. She would not allow them to see her break. That silent dignity, the last vestige of her humanity, was all she had left in this abyss of cruelty. She clenched her fists tightly at her sides, as if exerting that small amount of control over her shaking body would shield her from the inevitable. As the auctioneer gestured widely, striking deals and exchanging crisp bills in hushed tones, her whole being felt exposed, laid bare before the wolves ready to pounce. The tension in the air grew thicker, pulsing with the greed of wealthy men eager to snatch her up for their own purposes. Clara felt the weight of their gazes pressing down on her, dehumanizing her further with every second that ticked by. 500,000! shouted a man, his voice booming with authority. Around the room, gasps erupted as he raised the stakes, and Clara's heart sank further. She had no idea who he was or what he would want from her, but the grim reality of her situation began to sink in like icy water filling her lungs. The laughter and chatter of the other bidders faded into a dull roar of nonsense, and she focused to quiet the storm within her mind. "Going once," the auctioneer announced, the flickering spotlight making Clara's eyes water. Clara refused to look at her father, unable to bear the weight of his betrayal. Instead, she glanced around the room, observing the faces bathed in avarice. They were hungry lions, and she was their prey, tethered to the ropes of her circumstance. She was a pawn, stripped of identity, worth nothing except for the value someone placed on her. Going twice. The countdown felt like a ticking bomb, and Clara's breaths became shallower. She visualized freedom, not as an unattainable dream, but as a fierce fire ignited within her, urging her to stand tall despite the chains that bound her. This was not how her life was meant to be lived. Sold. The word echoed, reverberating through her mind like a final verdict. An invisible brick fell upon her chest, crushing her spirit. Who was it? Who had purchased her? The thought alone sent her heart racing with both fear and disbelief. Amidst the cacophony of cheers and laughter, a figure stepped forward, a man of undeniable presence. His eyes, piercing and dark, locked onto hers with a fierceness that startled her. Clara's heart skipped a beat as she felt his gaze slice through the crowd, igniting a flicker of something. Was it hope or fear? He walked with purpose, moving through the throngs of guests with an air of dominance. It was as though the entire room had fallen away, and there was only him and her, an unbreakable tether forming between them, one that had the potential to either save or ruin her. "Come with me," he commanded, his voice deep and steady, cutting through the noise surrounding them. Clara felt an inexplicable pull towards him, a sense of safety even amid chaos. But as she hesitated, still rooted in disbelief of what had just transpired, she caught a glimpse of her father's face twisted with fury. The scorn etched across his features was a terrifying reminder that this nightmare was far from over. The shadows of her past threatened to consume her, And the man who stood before her, an enigmatic savior or another captor, held the key to her uncertain future. As she took a tentative step forward, the weight of her father's betrayal loomed ever larger, and the moment tensed with an electric uncertainty that readied her for a fight she never asked for. "Clara!" her father bellowed, a warning laced with desperation. Every ounce of her instinct screamed to flee, to escape the chains that had entrapped her for too long. The anticipation in the air crackled, the question of what would come next hanging over her like a sword ready to drop. Would this be her deliverance or another layer of torment? The choice lay before her, and for the first time, Clara felt the stir of a courage bubbling deep within. With her father's voice echoing like a ghostly reminder of her past, she took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. The world was vast and unknown, terrifying yet tantalizing, and she was ready to face it, one step at a time. The atmosphere shifted abruptly as a new voice cut through the tension, deep and resonant, commanding attention like a thunderstorm after a long drought. 1,000,000, the voice declared, a smooth yet powerful tone that reverberated through the hall. Clara's heart skipped a beat, and she turned her gaze towards the source. A tall figure emerged from the shadows, his presence magnetic and overwhelming. Victor Caldwell, the enigmatic CEO known for his ruthlessness in business and his unwavering moral compass, stood confidently, his dark hair tousled yet refined, eyes glinting with purpose. The crowd fell silent, shockwaves rippling through the audience as the auctioneer faltered, momentarily lost for words. Clara felt a flicker of something within her, a spark of hope ignited by Victor's boldness. Could he truly be here to save her? Her mind raced, grappling with the sudden possibility that someone, somewhere, still believed in her worth beyond the confines of this grotesque spectacle. 1,000,000, the auctioneer repeated, regaining his composure, but the urgency in his tone was lost as the realization dawned on him. The stakes had escalated dramatically. Murmurs of disbelief swept through the crowd, and Clara felt the weight of their gazes shift, now tinged with respect for the wealthy man who dared to challenge the status quo. Victor stepped closer, the sharp lines of his jaw set in determination. "I won't let this happen," he said firmly, his voice unwavering. "This is not a sale. She is not a prize to be won." The words dripped with a fervor that struck a chord deep within Clara. How could he see her as more than the object her father had reduced her to? The auctioneer hesitated, glancing towards Gerald Hawthorne, who stood frozen, incredulous. "You're disrupting a perfectly legitimate auction, Caldwell. You can't just—" "I can, and I will," Victor interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "Clara Hawthorne deserves better than this. She deserves to be free." His gaze bore into Clara's, and in that moment, she felt seen for the first time in what felt like an eternity. The weight of her father's betrayal, the shame pressed upon her by the crowd, all began to melt away, replaced by a burgeoning sense of possibility. For the first time, she felt a glimmer of hope. It was as if Victor's presence had illuminated the darkest corners of her despair, shedding light on a path she thought had been permanently closed to her. "Going once?" the auctioneer faltered, his voice trembling under the pressure of Victor's commanding presence. "Going twice?" Victor raised his hand decisively. "Sold. To me." The finality of his words rang out like a battle cry, and Clara's heart soared and plummeted all at once. She was free. At least, that was what she hoped. But what now? Would he be kind? Would he keep her safe from the world outside? As the tension in the room slowly dissipated, Victor approached Clara, and the air around them seemed to shimmer, alive with an electric charge. "Come with me," he instructed gently, extending his hand toward her. Clara hesitated, caught between fear and hope, but the warmth of his gaze anchored her. She took a shuddering breath, her hand trembling as it reached for his. Victor's hand was firm and reassuring, a stark contrast to the cold, empty grasp she had grown accustomed to. She stepped down from the auction block, the sensation of the polished floor beneath her feet feeling surreal, as if she were walking on clouds instead of solid ground. She had escaped one cage only to step into another, but this time it felt different. There was a promise of something more. Victor led her through the throngs of stunned onlookers, and Clara felt their eyes on her, some filled with envy, others with disbelief. The whispers were replaced by a cacophony of questions. Who was this man? Why had he intervened? Could he truly be her savior, or was he simply another player in this dark game? As they exited the hall, the heavy door closing behind them with a resounding thud, Clara was enveloped in the cool night air. It felt refreshing, exhilarating, but also terrifying. The reality of her situation began to sink in. Victor had bought her freedom, but what did that truly mean? She was stepping into a world she knew nothing about, one that glimmered with both danger and opportunity. The ride to Victor's mansion was a blur. Clara sat in the back seat of an opulent car, the leather soft against her skin, a stark contrast to the rough fabric of her auction dress. Victor sat beside her, focused on the road ahead, the city lights flickering past like stars. She stole glances at him, trying to decipher his thoughts, to understand the man who had just changed the trajectory of her life. "Why did you do it?" Clara finally asked, her voice soft, almost trembling with the weight of her question. Victor turned his head slightly, his expression contemplative as he considered her words. "I've seen too many lives ruined by greed," he replied, his tone steady yet laden with emotion. "I couldn't stand by and watch another person be traded like livestock. You're worth so much more than what was happening back there." His words resonated with her, wrapping around her heart like a warm embrace. Clara felt a rush of gratitude, mingled with confusion. "But I don't understand. Why me? There were others. More desirable?" Victor's eyes softened as he met her gaze in the dim light of the car. "Desirability is a shallow measure of worth, Clara. What matters is a person's spirit, their potential. I saw you standing there, and it broke my heart to think of what you were losing." His sincerity enveloped her, and she felt the crack in her heart begin to heal, if only just a little. A part of her wanted to believe him completely, to trust in this unexpected savior who had turned her world upside down. But a lingering doubt remained. Could she truly allow herself to hope for a better future? As they arrived at Victor's mansion, the grandeur of the estate took her breath away. Tall columns framed the entrance, and the soft glow of lights spilled out onto the driveway, illuminating the path ahead. Clara stepped out of the car, her heart racing as she took in the beauty surrounding her. The opulence felt surreal, a stark contrast to the darkness she had just escaped. But before she could fully absorb the magnitude of her new reality, the tension of her past threatened to creep back in. Just as Clara was about to step into this new life, a chilling thought struck her. Would her father come for her? Would he seek to reclaim the power he had lost in that auction hall? The fear clawed at her insides, a reminder that her past was never far behind. Victor, sensing her unease, placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "You're safe now," he assured her, but doubt knotted in Clara's stomach. Could safety last when shadows loomed larger than ever? As they entered the mansion, the door closed behind them with a finality that both comforted and terrified Clara. She was free from the auction, yes, but the battle for her future was just beginning. Would Victor be the protector he seemed, or would he turn out to be just another chapter in her painful story? And, as if answering her unspoken fears, a chill rushed through the air, the ghosts of her past whispering warnings she could not ignore. Clara felt a rush of sensations as Victor led her away from the suffocating confines of the auction hall and into the cool evening air. The world outside was a stark contrast to the gaudy spectacle she had just escaped. Streetlights illuminated the path before them, casting a soft glow that seemed to embrace her as if welcoming her back to life. The luxury of Victor's sleek black car stood out against the dim backdrop of the city, a symbol of the new reality she was stepping into. As they drove through the glimmering streets, Clara remained silent, her heart racing with uncertainty. The plush leather seats enveloped her, a reminder of comfort she had long forgotten. Victor's gaze remained focused on the road ahead, his jaw set in determination as if he were a knight guiding her out of the darkness. But Clara was still grappling with the weight of disbelief. How could this be real? How could he want her? When they arrived at Victor's mansion, an impressive structure that towered above them like a fortress, Clara's breath hitched in her throat. The grand entrance was framed by exquisite marble pillars, and the expansive front yard was adorned with perfectly manicured hedges and vibrant flowers that seemed to bloom with life. It was a scene she had only ever seen in dreams, and yet here she stood, on the precipice of a life she scarcely dared to imagine. Victor opened the door for her, a chivalry that felt foreign yet thrilling. As Clara stepped inside, she was enveloped in warmth, the air thick with a blend of rich mahogany and soft floral notes. The opulence of the foyer was overwhelming. A grand chandelier hung above, casting a soft, shimmering light that danced across the walls adorned with breathtaking art pieces. She felt like a stranger in a museum, an intruder among treasures that sparkled with stories she could only guess at. "Welcome to my home," Victor said, his voice low and inviting as he motioned for her to enter. Clara hesitated, her heart pounding as she crossed the threshold. The plush carpet beneath her feet felt like a cloud, and as she moved deeper into the house, she was struck by the contrast to the cold, harsh world she had just escaped. "Are you hungry?" Victor asked, breaking the silence. Clara nodded slowly, her throat dry, as she realized how long it had been since she had eaten. "Let me prepare something for you," he said, heading toward an expansive kitchen that gleamed with polished stainless steel and granite countertops. Clara stood in the center of the living room, overwhelmed by the beauty surrounding her. The walls were lined with bookshelves, filled with volumes of literature, and a grand piano sat in one corner, its polished surface reflecting the light. It was a sanctuary, a stark contrast to the dingy corners of the streets where she had spent her nights. She could hardly grasp the reality that a man like Victor would bring her here, let alone offer her kindness. "Here we go," Victor called out, returning with a steaming bowl of soup and fresh bread. He placed the food on the table before her, the aroma wafting up in inviting tendrils. Clara's stomach growled audibly, a reminder of her long-forgotten hunger. She hesitated for a moment, the warmth of the meal making her feel vulnerable yet safe. "Go ahead," he encouraged gently, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "You deserve this." With trembling hands, Clara picked up the spoon, the first taste of the warm soup filling her with a sense of comfort that was both foreign and familiar. Each mouthful was a reminder of a life she once had, nourishing and nourishing, rich with flavors her father had often denied her. She felt the tears prickling at the corners of her eyes, a confusing mix of gratitude and sorrow. Victor watched her intently, a softness in his expression that made her heart ache. "You don't have to feel ashamed," he said, sensing her struggle. "You've been through so much. This is your time to heal." Clara swallowed hard, the lump in her throat growing as she grappled with the enormity of what he was offering her, a chance to reclaim her dignity, to step away from the shadows of her past. But the doubts crept in like dark clouds, threatening to overshadow the light she felt flickering within her. What if this was just a fleeting moment of kindness? What if he expected something in return? What if her past caught up with her, dragging her back into the darkness she had fought so hard to escape? As if reading her mind, Victor leaned forward, breaking the silence that had settled between them. "Clara, I want you to know that you are not just a charity case to me. You're a person deserving of respect and love. I see your worth, and I want to help you rebuild your life." His words wrapped around her like a warm embrace, igniting a flicker of hope that she had thought long extinguished. But just as quickly, the shadows of her past loomed larger, whispering doubts into her mind. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, the vulnerability of her question hanging in the air. Victor paused, his gaze unwavering. "I want nothing from you but the chance to support you. You don't owe me anything, Clara. This is about you finding your way back to yourself." She looked down at her hands, feeling the weight of his words settle within her. It was a truth she had yearned to hear, yet part of her remained trapped in fear, the chains of her past refusing to loosen their grip. The warmth of the meal and the kindness in Victor's voice felt like a lifeline, yet she wondered if she would ever truly believe she deserved it. As she finished her meal, Clara felt a flicker of resolve. She didn't know what the future held, or if she could trust this new reality, but she knew she had to try. Victor was offering her more than just a meal. He was offering her a chance at redemption, a glimmer of hope that perhaps she could be more than what her father had made her believe. Just as she began to envision a future beyond her past, the ringing of a phone shattered the fragile moment. Victor glanced at his phone, his expression shifting as he answered the call. Clara could see the tension creep into his features, a stark reminder that the world outside still loomed large, threatening to encroach upon the sanctuary he had created for her. "Hold on," he said, his voice gravelly as he stepped away to speak, leaving Clara alone with her thoughts. The warmth of the moment faded, replaced by a sense of uncertainty. As she listened to the low murmur of his voice, doubt spiraled within her. Would this life be hers? For long? Or would the shadows from her past come crashing back, dragging her down once more? In that moment of solitude, Clara's heart raced as the reality of her situation dawned on her. She was no longer just a pawn in her father's game. She was free, but the journey ahead was fraught with the unknown. And as Victor's voice drifted back into the room, she couldn't shake the feeling that the battle for her true self had only just begun. Clara savored the warmth of the soup, each spoonful soothing not just her hunger but also the lingering anxiety that clung to her like a shadow. The comfort of the moment was almost overwhelming, yet a flicker of doubt gnawed at her insides. As she sat at the elegantly set table, her eyes wandered to Victor, who was busying himself in the kitchen, moving with the ease of someone who belonged to this world. She, on the other hand, felt like an interloper, a ghost haunting a life that wasn't hers. "Thank you," she whispered, as Victor returned with a glass of water, his presence commanding without being overbearing. He nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his lips, his eyes bright with genuine kindness. But behind that smile, Clara could sense the weight of something unspoken, a tension that seemed to linger in the air like mist before dawn. Just as she was about to ask him about it, Clara heard the soft chime of her phone vibrating on the table. Her heart sank as she recognized the name flashing across the screen. It was Clara's father, a name that had once filled her with dread but now felt almost distant, like a faded photograph. She hesitated, the internal battle raging within her. Should she answer? Would he disrupt the fragile peace she was beginning to build? Before she could make a decision, Victor glanced at the phone and then back at her, his expression shifting from curiosity to understanding. "You don't have to answer if you don't want to," he said softly, as if sensing the turmoil coursing through her veins. Clara felt a swell of gratitude for his support, but the call still hung heavy between them, a reminder of the chains she had thought she had broken. With a deep breath, she declined the call, her finger hovering over the screen as she sent it to voicemail. Victor's gaze locked onto hers, an unspoken question lingering in the space between them. "Is everything all right?" he asked, genuine concern threading through his voice. Clara could see the sincerity in his eyes, and for a moment she felt an urge to confide in him, to spill out all the fears and doubts that had been boiling beneath the surface. I think so," she managed, though the words felt inadequate to convey the storm inside her. "It's just my father. He's been demanding." There was a tightness in her throat as she spoke, memories rushing back of the way he had treated her, of the neglect, the disdain. It was a struggle to reconcile the girl who had been sold at an auction with the woman sitting in this beautiful home, being offered kindness. Victor's expression darkened slightly, a flicker of anger crossing his features. "You don't have to worry about him anymore, Clara. You're safe here," he reassured her, but his voice held a hint of something deeper, a protectiveness that made her heart race. "But what if he tries to come here?" Clara's voice quivered, her mind racing with the implications of such a thought. "What if he tries to drag me back into that life?" The vulnerability in her words made Victor's jaw clench, and she could see the gears turning in his mind as he considered the potential backlash. "I'll make sure that doesn't happen," he said firmly, his tone brooking no argument. "I'll talk to my assistant, and we can come up with a plan. You deserve to be free from him." Clara felt a swell of emotions, gratitude and fear intertwining in a dizzying dance. She had never known someone to stand up for her, to care about her well-being without asking for something in return. As they finished their meal, a silence settled between them, comfortable yet charged. Clara couldn't help but feel that their bond was deepening, but the thought of her past looming over them cast a shadow on this burgeoning relationship. Just then, Victor's phone buzzed loudly on the counter, breaking the moment. He glanced at the screen and the light in his eyes dimmed slightly. "Excuse me for a moment," he said, his tone shifting as he stepped away to take the call. Clara watched him intently, her heart pounding with curiosity. She wanted to ask him what was wrong, but she held back, not wanting to intrude on whatever conversation he was about to have. She could only catch snippets of his side of the dialogue, words like press, backlash, and Clara's past, sending shivers down her spine. Clara's mind raced with unease, anxiety clawing at her as she imagined the world turning against her, the whispers of her past echoing through the halls of this magnificent mansion. What if Victor's kindness was not enough to shield her from the judgment of society? What if they saw her as nothing more than a pawn in her father's cruel game? When Victor returned to the table, there was a new tension in the air, a seriousness that hadn't been there before. "I need to be honest with you, Clara," he said, his voice steady but tinged with concern. "There may be some backlash regarding your past, especially considering how you came to be here." Clara's heart sank, the weight of his words heavy on her chest. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Is there something I should know?" Victor leaned forward, his eyes searching hers. "The media might catch wind of your auction. Your father could use it against you, painting you as a victim or trying to manipulate the narrative. I want to protect you from that." His determination was palpable, but Clara felt her self-worth teetering on the edge of a precipice. "I don't want people to see me as a charity case, Victor. I'm not just a victim." Her voice was sharper than she intended, but the fear of being reduced to nothing but her past was too much to bear. "I know that," he replied, his tone soothing. "But we live in a world where perceptions can be twisted. I want you to be ready for anything." Clara's heart raced as her mind processed the implications of his words. She had thought she could escape her past, but it seemed it was always lurking just beyond the horizon, waiting to pounce. Outside, the clouds began to gather, the first drops of rain pattering against the window, a soft but ominous melody that matched the tension in the room. Clara's breath quickened, the storm outside mirroring the turmoil within her. "What if they don't accept me?" she whispered, the vulnerability in her voice raw and unfiltered. "What if I'm not worthy of this life?" Victor's gaze softened, and for a moment it felt like they were the only two people in the world. "You are worthy, Clara. Don't ever doubt that. But we need to be prepared for whatever comes our way." The storm outside intensified, and Clara felt the walls closing in. This beautiful life Victor offered her was still fragile, still threatened by the darkness of her past. As the rain poured down, mingling with her insecurities, a shadow flickered at the edge of her mind, the realization that her father's influence was far from extinguished, and the battle for her future was just beginning. The tension in the air thickened, and Clara could feel it pulsating between them, the unspoken acknowledgement that a storm was brewing, one that threatened to shatter the fragile sanctuary they had begun to build. Would Victor's influence be enough to protect her from the impending chaos? As they sat in silence, the world outside darkened, and Clara knew one thing for certain. The fight for her freedom was only beginning. The moment Victor stepped away to take his call, Clara felt the warmth of the kitchen slip into an unsettling chill. The aroma of soup lingered, but it was now overshadowed by the impending dread that crept into her mind. She glanced at the phone, her heart thundering as if it had been set loose by the jangling of the notifications. The fleeting sense of safety she had just begun to enjoy felt fragile, like a vase perched on the edge of a table, ready to shatter. As she sat there, the silence grew heavy, wrapping around her like a suffocating shroud. She picked up her phone, her fingers trembling as she opened her messages. A new notification glowed ominously on the screen, and her breath hitched in her throat. It was from her father, the man whose very name had once held her captive and now threatened to pull her back into darkness. "Clara," the message read, the words stark and cold. "You think you can escape me? I will expose your shameful past if you do not return. You are not free, you are just a pawn in my game." Each word pierced through the fragile veil of security she had draped around herself. They were daggers, sharp and unforgiving, reminding her that she was not merely a victim of circumstance, but a living, breathing reminder of her father's cruelty. Clara's heart raced as memories flooded her mind. The humiliation, the barbed words, the sense of worthlessness that had been drilled into her from a young age. Hot tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. No, she wouldn't let him take her down again. The thought of Victor with his protective demeanor and warm kindness anchored her to the present. Clara remembered his words about safety and freedom. She was no longer that frightened girl at the auction. She was a woman who had tasted a glimpse of hope. With shaking hands, she typed a response, her fingers flying over the screen. "I'm not your pawn anymore. I will not let you control me. You cannot take away what I have found." As she hit send, a wave of defiance surged within her. The fear that had paralyzed her began to morph into something more potent. Resilience. She would confront her past, face her father's threats head-on. The thought ignited a fire within her, pushing back against the suffocating darkness that had long loomed over her life. Just then, Victor returned, his expression shifting from business-like concern to a softer, more intimate gaze. "Is everything all right?" he asked, his voice low, filled with genuine care that made her heart flutter. Clara hesitated, wrestling with the urge to confide in him. The weight of her past pressed heavily on her chest, yet she felt an undeniable urge to share this burden. "Not really," she admitted, her voice trembling. "My father, he just sent me a message." Victor's demeanor shifted instantly. His eyes darkened with a mix of protectiveness and anger. "What did he say?" he demanded, his tone firm yet calm, as if he were grounding himself for what was to come. Clara took a deep breath and recounted the message, watching as Victor's expression morphed from concern to fury. "He's threatening to expose me, to ruin everything I'm trying to build here." "Your father is a monster," Victor said, his voice low and filled with conviction. "He has no power over you here. You're safe, Clara. You have to believe that." Clara searched his eyes, seeking assurance amid the chaos. "But what if he tries to come here? What if he finds a way to drag me back?" The vulnerability in her voice trembled like glass about to shatter. Victor stepped closer, his presence enveloping her in warmth and strength. "I won't let that happen. We will come up with a plan. He doesn't know who he's dealing with." Clara felt a flicker of hope ignite within her as he spoke. "I want to fight back," she said, her voice stronger now. "I won't be a victim anymore." "That's the spirit," Victor encouraged, a proud smile breaking through his earlier anger. "Together, we'll make sure he doesn't stand a chance. I can use my resources to protect you. I won't let him take you away from this." As they stood there, an unspoken bond solidified between them. Clara marveled at the fact that someone like Victor, a powerful CEO with influence and means, was willing to fight for her. It felt surreal to have someone stand by her side, to believe in her when she had almost forgotten how to believe in herself. Yet, as they discussed strategies and potential actions against her father, Clara's mind wandered to the implications of her decision. Would confronting her father bring more danger than she could handle? Would he retaliate in ways she couldn't anticipate? Just then, a knock at the door startled them both, shattering the moment. Clara's heart raced as Victor exchanged a knowing glance with her. "Stay here," he instructed, his tone shifting into that of a protector. Clara nodded, her pulse quickening as Victor approached the door. The tension in the air thickened, an electric anticipation hanging between them. As he opened the door, Clara felt her heart pounding against her ribcage, the fear of the unknown clawing at her insides. In the doorway stood a figure she hadn't expected. A tall man with a stern expression, his eyes cold and calculating. "Victor Caldwell," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "We need to talk about Clara." Clara's breath caught in her throat as the reality of her father's influence unfurled before her like a dark, looming shadow. She stepped closer, her heart racing as she prepared to confront the storm that threatened to consume her newfound life. Victor stepped forward, the protective barrier he had built around her shifting to a more aggressive stance. "You will not speak to her," he said firmly, his voice devoid of fear. "You've lost that right." Clara's resolve solidified. She would not be afraid. This was her moment to reclaim her story, to confront the demons of her past head on. As the tension in the room crackled, she realized that this was not just a confrontation between men, it was a battle for her very soul, and she was ready to fight. The tension in the room thickened, wrapping around Clara like a heavy fog as she processed Victor's words. She wanted to believe him, to trust in the promise of safety and security he offered, but the shadows of her past loomed large. Could she truly let go of the chains her father had forged, or would they forever bind her? Victor, sensing her hesitation, took a step closer, his eyes searching hers with a fierce intensity. "Clara, I know it's hard to trust someone after everything you've been through, but I need you to understand that I'm not like him. I won't betray you. I won't use you." His voice was steady, yet there was a vulnerability in it that echoed her own fears. As Clara looked into his deep brown eyes, she could feel the battle raging within her. The wounds left by her father's cruelty were not easily healed. They were scars etched into her very being. She could hear echoes of his voice, the biting words that had cut her down, leaving her paralyzed with shame. The memories clawed at her, whispering doubts that stung like frost on bare skin. "I want to believe you, Victor," she said slowly, her voice barely a whisper. "But how can I be sure? My father, he has a way of twisting everything. He's manipulative, and I don't know if I can trust my own judgment anymore." The admission felt like a confession, peeling back the layers of her guarded heart. Victor nodded, his expression softening. "You don't have to trust me right away. Trust is built over time, and I'm willing to earn it. But I need you to know that I'm here for you. I won't let him hurt you." He paused, taking a deep breath as if gathering his own thoughts. "You're not alone in this fight, Clara. I have my own demons to face." Curiosity piqued within her, and she leaned in slightly, searching for the depths of his sincerity. "What do you mean? What demons?" Victor hesitated, his gaze drifting to the window, where the stars shimmered against the darkening sky. A moment passed, heavy with unspoken words. "I lost my sister to a man not unlike yours. She trusted him, believed he loved her, and in the end he destroyed her. I've dedicated my life to making sure that no one else experiences that kind of loss." Clara's heart ached at the mention of his sister. "I'm so sorry," she murmured, understanding the weight of his pain. "That must have been devastating for you." "It was," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "It taught me the importance of standing up against those who wield power to control others. I won't let you be another victim. I refuse to let your father win." His conviction ignited a flame in Clara's chest, but the flicker of doubt lingered, casting shadows on her hope. "But what if he finds a way to manipulate you, too? I've seen it happen. People who seem so kind can change in an instant. What if you're just trying to save me out of pity?" Victor took a step forward, closing the distance between them. "I'm not saving you out of pity, Clara. I want to be there for you because I care about you. You deserve more than what your father has done. You deserve a life filled with love and respect, not one where you're hiding in fear." Clara felt tears prick at her eyes again, but this time they were not born of despair. They were tears of gratitude. His sincerity washed over her, and for the first time she felt a glimmer of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years: hope. "Victor, Before she could finish her thought, the sound of the doorbell echoed through the house, slicing through the moment like a cold blade. Clara's heart dropped, and the warmth that had surrounded them dissipated into the chill of uncertainty. "Who could that be?" she asked, panic rising in her throat. "I don't know, but let's find out." Victor's expression hardened, a protective instinct igniting within him. He moved toward the door with purpose, and Clara followed, her heart racing. Each step felt like a countdown to an unknown fate, her breath hitching as Victor opened the door. There stood a figure draped in shadows, a familiar silhouette that sent a chill down Clara's spine. Her father, the man who had sold her like cattle, whose very presence had the power to unravel her. "Clara," he said, his voice smooth as silk but laced with malice, "I've come to discuss our little arrangement." Clara froze, the weight of dread crashing over her like a tidal wave. Victor stepped protectively in front of her, his posture radiating strength and defiance. "You need to leave," he said firmly, his voice unwavering. Her father's lips curled into a smirk, unfazed by Victor's presence. "You think you can protect her from me? She's still my daughter, and I can make her life a living hell if she doesn't comply." His gaze flickered from Victor to Clara, the threat hanging in the air like a storm cloud ready to unleash its fury. Clara's heart raced, the reality of her situation crashing over her. She had fought against the chains of her past, had tasted the freedom Victor promised, and now it felt like it was all slipping away. "I won't go back to you," she declared, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm not your pawn anymore. but her father's laughter echoed through the hallway, chilling her to the bone. You think you can just walk away? You have no idea what you're up against? Victor turned slightly, his hand subtly reaching for Clara's, a silent message of support. She'll never go back to you, he said, the intensity of his gaze locked on Clara's father. Not while I'm here. The air crackled with tension, and Clara felt the weight of her decision pressing heavily on her chest. Would she stand with Victor and confront her past, or would she allow her father to drag her back into the shadows? As her father's eyes narrowed with malicious intent, Clara's heart raced. The outcome was uncertain, but she felt a surge of strength coursing through her veins. This was her moment to reclaim her life. I choose my own path, she declared, her voice rising above the chaos, and I will fight for my freedom. But just as she spoke, her father's menacing words reverberated through the air, a dark promise that sent a shiver down her spine. You'll regret this decision, Clara. You have no idea what I'm capable of. The threat hung in the air, a looming specter ready to consume her newfound hope. Yet in that moment, Clara felt a flicker of courage ignite within her, fueled by the strength of her conviction and the unwavering support of Victor. She could face this battle, and for the first time, she believed she had the power to shape her own destiny. The stakes were higher than ever, and the battle for her freedom had only just begun. Clara's heart raced as she and Victor approached the grand entrance of the charity gala. The buzz of conversation and laughter surrounded them, a stark contrast to the turmoil that churned within her. She could feel the weight of 1,000 eyes as people turned to gaze at the couple entering the room. Victor walked with an air of confidence, his posture straight and his expression resolute. Clara, on the other hand, felt like an imposter, draped in the finery of someone else's life, her dark past trailing behind her like a shadow. As they stepped into the hall, the atmosphere shifted. It was electric with anticipation. A stage was set at the front, adorned with flowers and glimmering lights, where the evening's auction would soon begin. Clara's stomach twisted with anxiety, but Victor's presence steadied her. He glanced down at her, offering a reassuring smile that ignited a flicker of hope within her. She squeezed his hand, a silent affirmation of her reliance on him. The event unfolded as expected, with guests bidding on luxurious items, but Clara's attention drifted. She was acutely aware of the whispers that circled around them, the glances that lingered a moment too long. It was as if the very air was thick with judgment, and she braced herself for the inevitable moment when her father's influence would rear its ugly head. And then it happened. A group of critics, people whose opinions held weight in the community, cornered Victor near the bar. Clara watched from a distance, her heart sinking as she recognized the familiar faces of those who had once dined at her father's table. They were the type of people who thrived on power, wielding it like a weapon, and now they turned their venomous tongues toward Victor. Why would you even bother with her? One woman sneered, her voice dripping with disdain. She's nothing but a charity case, a victim of her father's misdeeds. You can do so much better. Clara felt each word slice through her like a knife, the sting sharp and immediate. She wanted to hide, to shrink away from the public humiliation, but she stood frozen, unable to look away. Victor, however, did not falter. He stood tall, a pillar of strength against the onslaught of their barbs. Clara is more than her past, he replied, his voice calm yet firm, resonating through the crowded hall. She is a survivor, and she deserves respect, not scorn. You don't know the battles she has fought, and you certainly don't understand the strength it takes to rise above them. The room fell silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air like a heavy cloak. Clara's breath caught in her throat, disbelief mingling with an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Victor was defending her. This powerful man, who had every right to distance himself from the chaos of her life, was instead standing up for her against the very people who had once belittled her. But the critics were relentless. You think you can save her? Another man chimed in, laughter threading through his words. She'll only drag you down with her. You'll see. Victor's expression hardened, the warmth that had enveloped them moments before replaced by a fierce determination. I won't let anyone dictate how I feel about Clara. She deserves a chance to redefine herself, and I will not stand by while you belittle her. This is not just about charity, it's about humanity. Open your eyes. Clara felt a surge of empowerment course through her veins. For the first time, the chains her father had forged felt a little less secure. Victor's words cut through the fog of despair that had settled within her, illuminating the possibility of a future untainted by her past. But even as the audience began to murmur in response, she could sense a storm brewing. The critics exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from surprise to something darker, an alliance forged in their shared disdain for anyone who dared oppose them, especially someone like Victor. Who do you think you are? One of the critics spat, stepping forward. An accusatory finger pointed at Victor. You're just a man trying to play the hero. You don't know what you're getting yourself into. Victor squared his shoulders, unwavering. I know exactly what I'm getting into, and I will not back down." His voice rang out, steady and authoritative, commanding the attention of the room. Clara is not a victim, she's a warrior, and anyone who cannot see that is blind to the truth. A wave of applause erupted from some of the attendees, a few standing in solidarity with Victor. Clara's heart soared. His words were a balm to her wounded spirit, a declaration that she was more than what her father had made her believe. But the tension didn't dissipate. Clara's father, Gerald Hawthorne, was not a man to be dismissed lightly. His influence was like a dark cloud, looming over them, ready to unleash its fury. She could feel the weight of his presence even from afar, the way he thrived on control, on manipulation. The thought sent a shiver down her spine. As the applause faded, Victor turned to Clara, his eyes searching hers for confirmation. "Are you ready to fight back?" he asked, his voice a low murmur filled with urgency. "This is just the beginning. We need to prepare for what's coming." Clara nodded, her pulse quickening at the thought of confronting her father and the life he had dictated for her. "Yes," she replied, her voice firmer than she thought possible. "I want to fight." But before they could delve deeper into their plans, Clara's phone buzzed in her pocket, an unwelcome reminder of the reality that still clung to her. She pulled it out, glancing at the screen, and her heart sank. A message from her father flashed ominously, the words stark and cold. "You've embarrassed me in front of my colleagues. You will pay for this." Tension crackled in the air between them, a palpable sense of impending confrontation. Clara's pulse raced as she realized the weight of Victor's words. The battle was not just with her father, but with the powerful forces that sought to keep her shackled. "Victor," she whispered, fear creeping back into her chest. "What will he do?" Victor's expression hardened, a protective instinct flaring in his eyes. "He will try to intimidate you, but we won't let him. You're not alone anymore." As the realization settled over her, Clara felt a flicker of determination ignite within her once more. She was ready to face the storm, to confront the darkness that had overshadowed her life for far too long. But the path ahead was fraught with danger, and she knew her father's wrath would be swift and merciless. The stakes had never been higher, and the next move would determine the course of her future. With Victor by her side, she felt the first stirrings of hope, but uncertainty loomed like a specter, whispering doubts that threatened to choke her resolve. The battle was only just beginning, and Clara was ready to fight. Clara felt the weight of the world on her shoulders as she stood in the midst of the gala, the kaleidoscope of lights and laughter swirling around her. Just moments ago, Victor's fierce defense had ignited a spark of hope, but that hope flickered precariously in the face of the ultimatum she had received from her father. The elegant ballroom, filled with laughter and chatter, felt like a cage, and she was trapped inside, suffocating under the expectations and judgments of those who had once reveled in her father's power. As the evening wore on, the whispers grew louder, and Clara could feel the eyes of the critics boring into her. She tried to focus on the charity auction, but her mind raced with thoughts of her father's threatening message, delivered with icy precision. "Return to me, Clara, or I will destroy everything Victor has built. You know I have the power to do it." The words echoed in her mind, a sinister reminder of the control he still wielded over her life. Victor, oblivious to the storm brewing within her, continued to engage with the guests, his charisma lighting up the room. Clara admired him from a distance, his confidence radiating like a beacon. But that light only served to cast her own shadows deeper, and she felt the familiar grip of fear tightening around her heart. How could she allow herself to be happy when the threat of her past loomed so large? "Clara?" Victor's voice broke through her thoughts, and she turned to see him approaching, concern etched across his handsome face. "Are you all right? You seem miles away." The sincerity in his gaze melted some of the ice surrounding her heart. "I'm fine," she lied, forcing a smile that felt foreign. "Just a bit overwhelmed, I suppose." He nodded, his brow furrowing slightly. "Let's step outside for a moment. I think we could both use some fresh air." Relief washed over her as they moved toward the balcony, the cool night air brushing against her skin like a comforting embrace. The sounds of the gala faded into the background, replaced by the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant hum of the city. Clara leaned against the railing, taking a deep breath, trying to steady the whirlwind of emotions within her. "Talk to me, Clara," Victor urged, stepping closer. His presence was a shield against the chaos of her thoughts. "What's really going on?" Clara hesitated, the words tangled in her throat. She could feel the weight of her father's ultimatum pressing down on her. Telling Victor meant exposing him to the very darkness she had fought so hard to escape. But as she looked into his warm brown eyes, she realized that hiding would only deepen the chasm between them. "My father," she began, her voice trembling. "He threatened me. He said if I don't go back to him, he will destroy everything you've built, everything you've worked for." The confession spilled out, raw and vulnerable. "He's still powerful, Victor. He has connections, influence. I can't let him hurt you. Victor's expression hardened, the protective fire igniting in his gaze. Clara, listen to me. You are not his pawn. You have fought too hard to reclaim your life to let him dictate your future. I won't allow it. But he's capable of terrible things, she replied, her voice cracking. I've seen it. He can ruin you, ruin everything. Then let's face him together, Victor said, his voice steady, unwavering. We'll confront him. You're not alone in this anymore. You have me. The warmth of his words wrapped around her like a lifeline, but doubt still gnawed at her. What if he's right? What if I'm just a burden to you? Victor took a step forward, his presence commanding. You are not a burden. You are a survivor, Clara. Your past does not define you. It's time to show him that you are no longer the frightened girl he manipulated. You are a strong woman who has the power to choose her own destiny. Clara felt the fire of his conviction ignite something deep within her. She had spent so long living in fear, allowing her father's shadow to loom over her. But now, standing with Victor, she felt a flicker of courage. You're right, she whispered, determination surging through her veins. It's time to confront him. I won't let him control me any longer. Victor's smile was a balm to her spirit. That's the spirit, Clara. Together we'll face whatever he throws at us. You are stronger than you think. But just as that resolve began to solidify, Clara's phone buzzed violently in her pocket, shattering the moment. She pulled it out, her heart sinking as she saw her father's name flashing across the screen. Her breath caught in her throat, dread pooling in her stomach. She exchanged a glance with Victor, who nodded, urging her to answer. Clara? Her father's voice dripped with a chilling calmness. I see you've chosen to ignore my ultimatum. I'm afraid that will have consequences. You should know that I've already started to pull some strings. What do you mean? Clara's voice trembled, dread creeping in. What have you done? Oh, nothing too drastic yet. Just a few whispers here and there to remind Victor of his place. But you know I won't stop there. If you truly want to protect him, you know what you have to do. Clara's grip on the phone tightened, the weight of his threats heavy in the air. You're a monster, she spat, her voice rising. I won't let you manipulate me any longer. Be careful, Clara. You might find that your newfound strength is not as powerful as you believe. You have until the end of this gala to make your decision. Choose wisely. The call ended, leaving Clara breathless, her heart pounding in her chest. She looked at Victor, who had been listening in silence, his expression a mixture of concern and determination. Clara, we need to act now, he said, urgency lacing his words. This is a declaration of war, and we cannot let him win. Clara nodded, a fierce fire igniting within her. No more running, no more hiding. We will confront him together. As they turned to head back into the gala, Clara felt a surge of empowerment coursing through her. The night was no longer just an event filled with glitz and glamour. It was the battleground where she would reclaim her life. The stakes were high, but with Victor by her side, she was ready to face the storm that awaited them. The tension between Clara and her father had reached a boiling point, and she would no longer allow him to dictate her fate. As they stepped back into the vibrant chaos of the gala, Clara took a deep breath, ready to confront the man who had once held her captive. The time for fear was over. It was time for her to rise.